This is so depressing. So miserable. I'm a victim.
Okay, say that again, but with more emotion, maybe?
I'm a victim. So depressing.
As it turns out, there are a lot of new laws surrounding human trafficking. Most states have very specific laws written for victims. Many laws written so that if a crime were committed during the event of being human trafficked, that the crime of the defendant who is a victim of human trafficking would be expunged and all records would be wiped clean from that defendant. Every state has it written differently. For example, compared with New York and California, New York isn't very specific, so some people might think it implies that any crime can be expunged just because you are a human trafficking victim, whereas California is very specific to write that you are a human trafficking victim at the same exact time of the crime. The only two states that don't really have laws regarding human trafficking victims and laws are Alaska and Hawaii. Sad reality is a lot of these laws are actually extremely recent. The law in New York only being written as recent as 2021. And truthfully, the laws are written with so much jargon that it's really not meant for specifically someone who's dealing with human trafficking to actually kind of have the focus and comprehension to understand what these, like, legal phrases are supposed to mean. Laws are really not built around actually protecting people. Considering human trafficking is like a foundational part of their establishment, laws and police are really not focused on bringing down what basically paying them. The laws that exist are still valid, but if the defendant has no awareness of these laws, then it's likely that the court, the police, the lawyers will never actually introduce them to the case. So the law I mentioned specifically refers to if you as a defendant were a human trafficking victim at the time of your crime. So if you did vandalism or self-defense and that other person tried to put a case up against you, you being a human trafficking victim would make it so that your crime would be dropped and your records wiped clean. And to be clear, we're all basically rape victims in some way. It's really not some hidden subversive part of our environment. It is actually very obvious and blatant and just intentionally gaslit out of us to forget and not notice. The societal burden of everyone being silenced kind of causes a self-inflicting, somewhat narcissistic tendency to adopt a rape victim mentality, which is a reaction to your trauma to become so self-absorbed in your own misery and forcible silence. You sort of negate the fact that we're all technically rape victims. Your victimization, while in a broader sense does matter, actually obsessing over your own soul experience kind of creates an echo chamber of narcissistic loathing, which no one else on the outside of yourself actually will be able to listen to. And a lot of times is a lot of self-gaslighting because it's a perpetuating cycle of nobody listening to begin with, and then the individual making it so that it's hard to actually be able to listen to this person's experience. And eventually it leads to just repeating thoughts and behaviors of I'm a victim, I do these behaviors because I'm a victim. And eventually the victimhood status kind of becomes perceived as an excuse by other people who may want to help you but just can't, or people who have already hurt you want to use against you. This cycle is perpetuated by them. So yes, for those of us who have already heard past the self-absorption stage of our trauma and have actually learned to bond and talk about it in a real way without calling each other out or telling each other it's not enough or it's fake. Past that point and maturing and actually talking about it in a realistic way, even joking about it lovingly, relieves yourself of the self-absorption of what you've been through. Realistically, the trauma you had was experienced by many other people. Your trauma is not just your trauma, and likely a lot of other people were there as you experienced the same exact situation. So rape victim mentality is really another self-gaslighting tool that develops into narcissistic tendencies and behavior and mindset. There's an unbelievable amount of dead bodies in this bog and every bog, and people just move on with their day because it's just so normalized, and yet they don't even talk about it. A lot of times suicide is a result of a perpetuated rape victim mentality on the self, which develops into other complexes such as alcohol addiction or identifying strongly with being a pedophile, even at a young age. Truthfully, the rest of us who have matured past that point do not care about your victimization, do not care about your self-victimization. We are here working for each other and working to build a better world for each other. And your mentality is actually stifling yourself and stifling us from wanting and being able to actually help you. Self-destructive tendency, something you have to choose to mature from. And other rape victims are busy helping each other. They can't just fix your complex on their own. And it's freedom of choice, so it's always going to be up to you to do it. We're in a very self-destructive society right now, and every system in place is built to either survive it out considering actually replacing it, or to be built within it, therefore protecting the franchises, i.e. human trafficking, and not the actual people. It's easy to get lost in ourselves, but for those of us who have each other, that's who we're here for. We don't have rape victim mentalities. We are social workers, psychologists, scientists, people working to build a better society, and we're rape victims.